Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem. Welcome everybody to the Aliyah day. We're in the fourth Aliyah of Parshat Vayeishev, and today we are getting into the story, or coming to the story, of Judah and Tamar, kind of leaving, if you will, for a moment anyway, the story of Joseph and his brothers, getting into this interesting story about how the line of Messiah is now going to start through Judah having relationships with what he thinks is a prostitute, a harlot. Very interesting messianic implications here, because first of all, the Messiah is a direct descendant of this union. It's also interesting because we're in the middle of this story of Joseph, and we're seemingly like overwhelmed with the types and shadows, the patterns that we're seeing of the suffering Messiah and Joseph. And then in the middle of the story, the Torah just kind of pivots to this whole chapter dedicated, chapter 38 in the Chumash here. This whole chapter dedicated to this kind of seemingly bizarre story of Judah going down to find a wife and getting a wife for his sons, and the sons dying off, and then ultimately consorting with who he thought was a prostitute. You know, it's something in Judaism that's very important, and that is kavana. Intentionality is important. When we're performing a mitzvah, it is critical that we have the proper intention. Intention matters. If you do something intentionally, that intentionality permeates whatever it is that you have done. So, in other words, in looking at this situation, even though Tamar was not a prostitute, she was not a harlot, if you will. And so one could say, well, the Messiah did not really descend from a harlot, although, you know, you do have in the lineage of Messiah, you know, Rahab or what have you. But putting that aside, the reality is that because Judah believed that he was engaging with a prostitute at the moment of conception, that intentionality is permeated into that event. Okay. So, and all of this is very interesting, very strange. I also want to point something out from the beginning, and that is that in the midst of the demise of Joseph, right? The brothers have betrayed Joseph. They have sold him into slavery. Basically, let's just kind of say it for what it is, okay? The brothers have killed him. They've turned him over to the Gentiles. As far as they're concerned, he's as good as dead. They don't ever expect to see him again. They don't expect that he's going to survive, okay? That's really their expectation. We're going to come back to all of the Joseph story, of course, tomorrow. We'll be back on that story. But it is interesting that in the midst of all of that, at the point of death, if you will, okay, at the point at which the brothers turn over Joseph to be killed, okay, at that moment, all of a sudden, the Torah pivots and we start talking about Messiah ben David. This is not coincidental, okay? The story of Messiah ben David is right in the middle of the story of Messiah ben Yosef. Why? Because they're connected, of course. At the moment at which you have Moshiach ben Yosef being killed by his brothers, being rejected by his brothers, at that exact moment, we have the birth, if you will, the story of the birth of Moshiach ben David. They're right there together on purpose. This is supposed to teach us a lesson. This is why later we're going to see this encounter It's going to be down the road, but we're going to see this encounter of Judah and Joseph kind of coming together in this encounter when Joseph is being revealed to his brothers, or right before then. And there's tension in the room, and the sages have brought down that that encounter is actually prophetic of when Messiah ben Yosef encounters, if you will, Messiah ben David. Not that there is something literally like that that's going to happen, but rather those two tensions are going to come together. Right now, there's a tension, if you will, between Messiah ben Yosef and Messiah ben David. What am I talking about? Well, here is the tension. The tension is that Messiah ben Yosef is the one who comes and dies for the sins of Israel, but the Messiah is not supposed to die. And then the Messiah ben David is the one who's going to come and rule and reign as the Moshiach forever and ever. And, you know, the idea that he could be killed is not in our mind as Jews. This is why Judaism, if you'll forgive the expression, came up with, I don't mean that literally, but just for the sake of discussion, came up with the idea of Messiah ben Yosef. Why? Because it was pretty clear through rabbinic literature that the Messiah was going to suffer and die, and yet he can't die, yet he's going to live forever, right? So what do? You come up with two Messiahs, but really what it is two Advents is really what it is. By the way, you will hear, if you're out there in the stratosphere, you will hear anti-missionaries tell you that Jews do not believe in two Advents of the Messiah, two, if you will, comings of the Messiah. I'm going to tell you right now, that is absolutely false. Absolutely false. The Midrash Rabbah to Shir Hashrim specifically says that the Messiah is going to appear and then disappear and then reappear. Okay? The very fact that we have two Messiahs that we're even talking about this whole time, Messiah ben Yosef, Messiah ben David. Messiah ben Yosef comes to suffer and die for the sins of Israel, and he is resurrected to new life and becomes Messiah ben David. That is two Advents. So just take this check to the bank. It's a good and it will cash. The idea that Judaism does not believe in A, a dying Messiah, or B, a Messiah who appears twice is absolutely false. By the way, the pattern in each of the three cases is opposite to what they tell you. As an example, Joseph appeared, disappeared, and reappeared. Moses appeared, disappeared into the wilderness, and reappeared. David appeared, disappeared, and reappeared. Why? Why do I say that? Because he appeared and was anointed king, and then he went into exile. Anybody pick up on this story? He was chased around by Saul and went into exile, and then he reappeared again, right? Nobody thought he was king. You know, I'm going to repeat myself again because there's always new people who are watching every day. Thank God, by the way, that you're here. I want to repeat myself. For those of you who watch every day, this is going to sound redundant, but that's intentional as well, because I want to Chinese water torture you. Not really. Charlie, that might have been okay. Charlie's fine. Charlie's fine, by the way, with waterboarding and water torture because he's kind of into it. He enjoys it because he's a penguin. But anyway, the reality is I want to emblazon this into your brain. Okay. I need you to understand. I need you to just download this as a mantra. Say this with me. The Sanhedrin, the Nasi of the Sanhedrin, the king of Israel, and all the officials said that David wasn't a Jew, much less eligible to be king. Okay? I need you to understand that. I need you to know that. And the reason is because when somebody comes to you and says, the Jews have utterly rejected Yeshua as the Messiah. You know, they won't say his name Yeshua. They'll only call him Jesus. That's purposeful too. Why? Because we talked about this yesterday. They're trying to erase his name. Then when they say that to you, you can go, great. That's actually good news. What? Yeah. Because see, we rejected David as well. The entire Sanhedrin, the Nasi of the Sanhedrin, and even the king of Israel and all of his officials said that David wasn't even Jewish, much less king. So you see, as it turns out, he was in fact the king. And as you can see, so us rejecting him is actually part of the equation. By the way, did you know we did that to Joseph and Moses too? You see? You see how this works? All right, so I have a lot to say. I've said it already, but I'm going to say more of it. So I want to bring us on board. Hey, look, we already have a nutcase online saying that they're Yeshua. It's too early for that, man. I haven't had enough coffee. Mental health, by the way, is an issue in America. Are you aware of that? May HaShem help us. Good morning, Sergio. Glad you're here. Nellie Grace, glad you're here. Hepzibah Boker Tov. Kimba Mintz, good morning to you. Alita, Boker Tov to you. Seth Holt, good morning. Couture, hope you're having a great day. Russ, good morning. Milka, good morning to you. Glad you're here. Greg Kroon, Boker Tov. Kevin, Boker Tov. Timothy, good to see you. Peaches, Formula from Georgia, glad you're here. Amita, hope you and Pinkus and the fam are doing great. Who else do we have? Ahava, Boker Tov. Samuel, good morning. Johan, good to see you. Glenn, good morning to you. Jubilee, glad to see you this morning. And Wendeley, good morning, Wendeley. De los Santos, what a great last name. We have Andrew De Leon, Wendeley De los Santos. I feel like I should be like some type of Mexican general on the front line. Good morning, Beard of Prey. Emmanuel from Nigeria. Good morning, Kara, Boker Tov. Order 66. Well, good morning to you. Good morning, Kevin. Seth, good to see you. Sarah Merritt, hope you and Shane are doing great. Ariella Rafaela, good morning. Oh, there's Andrew De Leon. Andrew De Leon. En garde. Good morning to you, Chanel. And Michael and Brenda Jones and Levi. Good morning to you, sir. So, Levi, I heard you're moving to Texas. Good morning to Sergio and Makaya and Shoshana Brenner. Chris and Crystal, good morning, Kevin. Leah, good morning to you. Good morning, Linda Hancock, who's watching on Facebook. Glad to see you this morning, Linda. Hope you're doing great and being blessed. Good morning, Eliezer. Kathy, good morning to you. Atara, good morning. Ellie, good morning to you. Hope you and Joseph are doing great. Who else do we have? Did I miss anybody? Just checking. Timothy, good morning to you. Leah, good morning to you. Hope you and Shmuel are doing fantastic. Hannah Cantu, good morning. Yolanda, Boker Tov to you as well. Mary Leon, good morning to you as well. Glad you're. I'm not used to having Charlie over my shoulder. Are you okay back there? He's really digging the penguin Hanukkah, which, by the way, was a gift to him by the Rebbetzin. So he asked me if he could have it all year round. I said, no, you have, because that wouldn't be special. It wouldn't be special. We've had this argument yesterday. All right, so let's get into this conversation about this whole incident, because we talk often about many things about the Messiah and the peculiarities thereof, but one of our leaders, by the way, sent me this little clip yesterday, I think it was yesterday, and it was of a rabbi from a particular sect. I'm not familiar with this rabbi. I never heard of him. Don't know anything about him. I'm familiar with this sect and so forth, of course, but him personally, I don't know. It was just it was like a 5-minute clip. But what's interesting about this particular rabbi, and one of our leaders sent it to me, is that he was saying what I've heard before. he said some things I've heard before, and then he said something else that I thought was interesting that I had not necessarily heard before, but it makes total sense. He was telling a story about the Alter Rebbe, who was the founder of Chabad, and the opposition that the Alter Rebbe had been running into, which all Hasidim had been running into back in the day. But that's not, we talked about that before. That's neither here nor there. But what he was talking about is that when the Messiah comes, that we will hate him. He's talking about Jews, okay? And that we won't like him. He won't be what we're hoping for. He won't be what we're expecting. And he said something else. And so all of that I already knew, because that's actually part of Jewish literature. So you know what? I have a commitment to you as a rabbi, as perhaps your rabbi. This is my commitment to you. Okay. And if you've been around me for 5 minutes, you know this to be true. I will always deal honestly with sources. If I don't know, if it's just my opinion, if I'm just guessing, if you will, I'll tell you. Okay. If it's sourced, I'll tell you that as well. I will never gaslight you. Okay. I'm really not into that. And so there's unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of people in general. Okay. Just in general, but I'm now going to focus on kind of the anti-missionary rabbi. They will gaslight you all day long. And they'll try to tell you that, oh no, that when Messiah comes, we're going to be like, oh, joy. Joy to the world. It's going to be amazing. No, it's not. That's not what rabbinic literature says. Okay, but anyway, this rabbi was bringing this down. But something else he said was, when the Messiah comes, and this is the part I thought was interesting, if you juxtapose it to the gospel message, he said, when the Messiah comes, he's going to compel, he's going to cause the Tzaddikim to make teshuvah. Because the Tzaddikim, or as the way he pronounced it, Tzaddikim. But anyway, the Tzaddikim are not going to, they're going to realize how far they are and so forth from the truth. Now, this is not exactly surprising because, ladies and gentlemen, the Messiah is going to cause all of us to make teshuvah. When we stand in the light of God, none of us are going to think that we did a good job. Okay? Let's just deal with that fact right now. I don't care how close we think we are to the truth. Even those of us who are Lapidniks and who really know the Moshiach and understand who he is and so forth, every single one of us, when we're standing in the light of HaShem, we're all going to be like, you know what? I'm such a loser. I'm such a failure. I could have done so much better. And you know what? That's A, true, and B, healthy. But I did think it was interesting because what did the Moshiach do? He came to Israel and ran around saying what? Repent, make teshuvah. So anyway, look, the point is we're not going to like the Messiah as Jews. We didn't. When he showed up, we hated him. And that I want to emphasize is all part of the equation. Okay? It's all important. We talked about this at length yesterday. But we come back to this story of Judah. Judah is like, he's supposed to be the example. He's supposed to be the king. He's Judah, the Lion of Judah. And he leaves this incident of having just been, Judah was one of the instigators, the chief instigator in killing Joseph. So he decides, I just killed Joseph. What should I do now? Let me go find a wife. And he goes and he finds a wife, from the Canaanites. He goes down and finds a Gentile wife. Now, did she convert and become a Jew? We could surmise maybe she did. I don't know. But the point is that he kind of went off and just found this non-Jewish woman. And the incident of Tamar and his sons and the sons being wicked, and we could, you could get off in the weeds and all of that. And then he ends up consorting with her. He thinks she's a harlot. And from that union come Perez and Zerah. And from Perez is going to come the Moshiach. And so it's really like another opportunity to say, look at how the Moshiach comes from inauspicious, really kind of spiritually defiled means. You know, it's interesting because in Judaism, there is, and again, you know, rightfully so, but there's a lot of adulation given to those who come from prestigious families. Oh, look at Rabbi so-and-so. He's a great rabbi. His dad was a great rabbi. His grandfather was a great rabbi. He's descended from great rabbis. The pedigree is meaningful in Judaism. The problem with Messiah is he doesn't have a good pedigree. And the Messiah's pedigree are people like Tamar, Rahab, Ruth. I mean, he doesn't have a good pedigree, okay? And so this is why when the Messiah was waxing eloquently, they were like, "Who is this guy? He doesn't have a good pedigree. He's not from a prominent family." So it's just interesting. Rabbi Weiss starts out his commentary on this. His article is titled, interestingly enough, "The Light of the Moshiach." And this is what he writes. He says, this week's Parshat presents us with a series of events that are exceedingly difficult for us to understand. Pause. This is written, of course, to a Jewish audience. It's difficult for a Jewish audience to understand, but it's not difficult for a Lapidnik to understand because we see in the text the types and shadows of the Moshiach. What's difficult to the Jewish mind to understand is how can all these righteous people come from unrighteous situations? How is it that the most righteous of human history, the 12 sons of Jacob, or in this case, the 11, how could the most righteous be the ones to commit such a heinous sin as killing Joseph? Okay. So anyway, it says here, how did Joseph find his way from the peace and tranquility of his father's home to the dungeons of Egypt and ultimately to the heights of power, amassing the fortunes of the known world? Furthermore, why was the episode of Judah and Tamar inserted in the middle of the narrative? The two episodes seem entirely unrelated. That's true. When you take it at face value, these two things don't have to seem any commonality. However, when you understand, as I said from the beginning of this teaching, when you understand that this is related to Messiah ben Yosef and Messiah ben David, they're juxtaposed together, then it makes sense. Okay? It says here, the Midrash states as follows. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman expounded on the Pasuk. For I know the thoughts that I am thinking of you, says Adonai, thoughts of peace and not of evil, in order to give you future and hope. The brothers were occupied with the cell of Joseph. Joseph was occupied with his sackcloth and fasting and anguish over his enslavement. Reuben was occupied with his sackcloth and fasting and penitence for the sin with his father's bed. Yaakov was occupied with his sackcloth and fasting and mourning over Joseph. Judah, was occupied in finding a wife, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu was involved in creating the light of the Messiah. Okay? So that's an interesting statement. So what we see here with the cell of Joseph, okay, and the betrayal of his brothers, all of what we see here is all about creating the light of Messiah. So there, we see another pattern. You have to notice the patterns. A lot of times when people are looking at the Messiah on both sides of the fence, on the Christian side, this is 100% true. And on the Jewish side, it can also be true. They ignore the patterns. Christianity completely ignores the patterns. Like there's nothing even the Jesus, the traditional Jesus of the Christian church is not even remotely related to the Yeshua of the Gospels. And that's unfortunate. You have to look at the pattern. Okay. You know, I talk about, by the way, as it relates to that, the pattern of the Exodus, right? It's so important. If you just follow the bouncing ball, we were in Egypt as slaves, couldn't save ourselves. God saved us. We went to the Red Sea. That's the mikvah, immersion in water. We went from there as born again, set free, redeemed people. What was our next destination? The next destination was Sinai, where as a redeemed, born again, immersed in water people, we received the law of Moses. See, Christianity ignores that pattern. In fact, they have it completely backwards. According to Christianity, which was really the religion of Paul, which is a false religion given to us by a one man, we were told that we were in bondage to the law, which is, by the way, is blasphemy, because the law is God, literally. So God had us in bondage to his own scriptures, which of course is insane. And we, through Messiah, we were set free, not from Egypt, but from the bondage of Scripture. And really, it's backwards, actually. We were according to Paul, we were at Sinai, got set free from Sinai, went through the waters of the mikvah in reverse, and went back to Egypt, where now we do what Egyptians do. Like all the holidays are basically Egyptian. I mean, not literally, but figuratively. And, you know, we eat whatever we want, do whatever we want. You know, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a complete reversal. It goes on to say here, at that time, Yehuda descended to find a wife. He then fathered the line from which Moshiach would ultimately be born. Before she feels her birth pangs, she will have given birth. The ultimate Redeemer was born before the birth of the first oppressor. For this reason, the Pasuk says, at that time, Yehuda descended, follows the Pasuk, the Midianites sold him to Egypt. So this is something else that's interesting, and that is that God brings the Redeemer before there's an oppressor. In other words, the Redeemer does not come as a result of the oppressor or in response to the oppressor. God, in his foreknowledge, created the Redeemer first. This is why there's that verse that in Revelation it talks about that this Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. That's actually a biblical concept. Why? Because the Torah, or excuse me, Judaism and the oral Torah says that before there was a universe, that God created Teshuvah. Okay, before there was a universe. Not before there was man, not before there was the sin of the Garden of Eden. Before there was a universe, God created Teshuvah. This is another reason why the letter writer's gospel, which was a false gospel, was so, like, specifically talking about the book of Galatians. The reason that book of Galatians is such a heretical work, and it's so not Jewish. It's so, anyway, I don't get off into that. But the reason it's such heresy is because the book of Galatians, among other crazy and completely unbiblical thoughts, brings down that it teaches that grace came with Christ. Okay. And that's complete heresy. It's complete. It's logically foolish, and it's really just untenable. What we actually find with Jews and Judaism and the Bible and oral law is that grace, teshuvah, the ability to make amends with God, existed before there was existence. Okay. In other words, grace did not enter the picture at any particular point. Grace is the picture. You understand, by the way, that teshuvah, grace, the mercy, the kindness of God, is actually God. So when it says it existed before there was creation, what it's really trying to say is that this is the essence of HaShem. In other words, our entire existence is the mercy of God, the kindness of God. That's why there's no such thing as, well, before it was really brutal, and then at the old rugged cross, and suddenly we got forgiveness. That anybody who would say that in Galatians is somebody who doesn't know God and doesn't understand scriptures, and certainly doesn't understand Jewish thought. Now, there's people who hear me say that, and they would, of course, they're not Jewish, and they don't know anything about Jewish thought. And they would say, you're wrong. But then again, they're not Jewish and don't know Jewish thought. And therefore, somebody who doesn't know Judaism and doesn't know Jewish thought, a non-Jewish thought would make sense to them. Does that make sense? But as a Jew who understands Jewish thought, that I can tell you is not Jewish thought and therefore makes no sense. Is that complicated? I mean, so the planting of the seeds of Moshiach, or what's going on here. Judah went down. This says coming after the sale of Joseph. Judah had a moral downfall. So here we see another pattern. When we rejected the suffering Messiah, Joseph, we immediately had a moral downfall. And we see that pattern play out. That's exactly what happened when we rejected Yeshua. When we rejected Yeshua, Israel had a moral downfall. Yes, Rome came and destroyed the temple, and yes, that's true. And the Jewish nation at that time of this destruction of the Second Temple was a moral mess. We were killing each other. We were. In fact, the sages say that the reason that the Second Temple was destroyed was because of baseless hatred. So we see the pattern here. Israel had a moral downfall after we rejected the true Messiah. Okay. So it goes on to say, the future seems tragically jeopardized and the horizon appears bleak. However, the history of our people teaches us with numerous examples that providential help comes just at the moment of deepest despair, for God creates the cure before he creates the illness. That's the Megillah 13b from the Talmud, and that's what I was just talking about a moment ago when I talked about that Teshuvah was created before the foundations of the universe. And the prophet Isaiah exclaims in his vivid style, before she had travailed, she, that is the daughter of Zion, brought children into the world. Isaiah 66:7. That is to say, before beginning of the first exile, providence was preparing the light of the ultimate Redeemer. And so just as the sale of Joseph to Egypt led to the Egyptian exile, the Torah mentions Judah's marriage, the marriage from which will come Perez, the forefather of the kingly line of the house of David, ancestor of the Messianic dynasty. This is from that's quotation from Ruth 4:18. So the point here is that at Israel's most tragic moment, okay, if you think about Jacob, Israel, okay, Jacob had a lot of trials in his life, a lot of, disappointments, a lot of tragedy. Okay. I mean, we could go through the whole wife thing and everybody, all the difficulties. Okay. But Jacob, or Israel's greatest tragedy, was the death of his son, Joseph. Now, what it's saying here is at the moment of our greatest tragedy, there God brings light. So in the case of Israel, Israel's greatest tragedy was the rejection of the suffering Messiah. And yet, it's at that moment that the light of the true Messiah was created. Okay? You know, this is one of the reasons why I say, just as an aside, if Yeshua is not the Messiah, okay, he is, but Hasve Shalom, if let's just say for the sake of argument, we're wrong, I'm going to tell you right now, there won't be one, because nobody could fulfill even remotely these patterns that we're talking about. I'm not even talking about prophecies and so forth and so on. I'm talking about, I mean, think about it. Like the Messiah is supposed to be born in the city of David, which is Bethlehem. Are you aware that Jews don't even live in Bethlehem right now? I mean, it's completely controlled by the so-called Palestinians. But putting that aside, because that could change. That's possible that could change. Okay, but put that aside. There's the patterns that we're seeing in Scripture were so precisely met by the Messiah. To think that somebody else is going to come along and do it more precisely is frankly kind of laughable. Okay. If we look at these patterns, we're like, my goodness, from this situation is coming, the light of the Messiah. It's crazy. Now, Philo of Alexandria tells us that Tamar was brought up among idolaters and converted to a belief in one God. And this is actually confirmed in Sota 10a, which is an interesting idea, by the way, because this is almost like the story of Bachya, the daughter of Pharaoh, who, under her own auspices, under her own feelings, converted to Judaism with nobody around. It was just her. She went to the waters of the Nile. This is what the Talmud teaches, by the way. She refuted idolatry, went to the waters of the Nile, immersed in the waters of the Nile for a mikveh, for conversion, came up out of the water, and there comes baby Moses. It's a phenomenon. Well, apparently this happened to Tamar as well. So we see kind of a pattern here, and we see this in our own time, in our own day and age. There are people who, on their own accord, have just awakened and said, you know what? I feel like I need to be Jewish. Now, they come here to Lapid and they learn and they kind of formalize that conversion, if you will. Okay. But they're kind of the Tamars. They're kind of the Batyas. And they're not limited to women, of course. There's men who have these same feelings as well. So there's another insight here speaking to this. I thought this was very interesting. Why are converts so important, okay, to the plan? I've said something else before. I want to repeat it here. I repeat myself sometimes, but it's on purpose. If you look at all the false messiahs that Israel has embraced, Bar Kokhba, Shabbatai Zvi, the Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman, other false messiahs, they've only attracted Jews. There hasn't been a non-Jewish following of these false messiahs. And that, by the way, is also outside of the pattern. Every true redeemer had a substantial non-Jewish following. No, I say non-Jewish. Now they became Jewish. Okay. They didn't remain non-Jewish. But what I'm trying to say is they attracted the nations and the nations became converts. Okay. And this has been the case in every true Messiah. Now I'm talking here about the Messiah types. Okay. Not the literal Messiah. But this was true of Joseph. It was true of Moses. It was true of David. You could even make the case that it was true of Mordecai from the book of Esther, who is a messianic type figure as well. They all had a substantial following of non-Jews who became Jews. So therefore, the idea that the Messiah of Israel is only going to attract Jews is actually not part of the pattern. And I would argue is a disqualifier. Okay. Now, it says here, now, just as the maternal side of the dynasty of the future Messianic king was tainted by sin, so too the paternal side was affected by Judah's wrongdoing, okay? He married a Canaanite woman, and this was the beginning of his fall. Now, before this, it's talking about how the maternal line had this same issue with respect to Ruth. Okay, now the paternal line has this issue. So it says he married a Canaanite woman. Of course, now she had gone through conversion, but nobody might have really realized that. But that, putting that aside, it says he married a Canaanite woman, and this was the beginning of his fall, as the Torah shows. He cohabitated with his daughter-in-law from this forbidden union came Perez, the paternal ancestor of David. It says, it goes on to say, in order to understand the minds of men of all races. Now listen to this. This is what the Moshiach needs, and this is why his line has been tainted, if you will, with all these goyim, who of course became Jews, but still, okay? Anyway, it says, in order to understand the minds of men of all races, in order to inspire them with a deep love of God, the future Redeemer of mankind will no doubt have to carry a drop of non-Jewish blood in his veins. And in order to be the supreme arbiter of justice and altruistic love, he must also have witnessed error and sin right in the ranks of his own family. So in other words, what it's saying here, what I was just saying, the Messiah is going to reach all mankind, not just Jewish people. Now, of course, these people will become Jewish, basically, but what I'm trying to say is he's going to reach all mankind. In order to do that, he needed to have drops of non-Jewish blood, as it were, in his veins. Now, we see this in another insight where it talks about Moses marrying Zipporah. It talks about the fact that Moses had to be married to Zipporah, who was the daughter of an idolatrous priest, in order for the Exodus to be effective. Why? Because the Exodus was not just about saving the Jews from Egypt. It was about bringing out the mixed multitude as well, which, by the way, was significantly greater in number than the Jews. The Jews came out 600,000. The mixed multitude was 2.4 million. A lot of people don't think of it that way. They think about, well, the Jews came out and there was this little side group, like a little, following. No, it wasn't a side group. It was 2.4 million. Point being, is that the insights bring down. When we get to that story in Exodus, I'll share this, Bezrat Hashem, I'll share this again, but it talks about that it was a spiritual situation that Moses needed to be linked with a non-Jewish woman. Of course, she converted and became a Jew as well. They all did. But the point is that she needed to be linked with her because it was in the merit of Zipporah, the non-Jew, that 2.4 million non-Jews were saved along with Israel. You see the point? This is the message that's trying to be brought down here. Something else about Tamar, by the way, is that when it talks about she went to the crossroads, there's an insight there that says she went to pray. Okay. She went to, according to the Talmud, and in Sota 10a, she went there to pray because she wanted to be part of the Jewish people. She wanted to give birth, as it were, to someone significant in the Jewish family. So Tamar's heart was righteous. Now, she was being rejected by Judah. Now, this is another story, part of the story. There's so many parts of the story. I'm running out of time. I'm looking at the clock going, yeah, I know I'm over time. But there's so many parts of this story because Judah rejected Tamar. You're not worthy to be in my family. I told you I'd give you my son, but I'm going to kind of not do it. So there's another pattern. The pattern is that Judah is going to reject righteous converts. For selfish reasons or irrational fears. We see that today. We see that today in Judah, in Israel. Okay, all Jews are Jews, by the way. You know, it's not just because you came from the tribe of Judah. So I want to be careful when I'm using these analogies that I don't trigger wrong Gentile theology. People from Asher are also Jews. People from Benjamin are Jews. People from Issachar are also Jews. We're all called according to the name of the king. But using Judah as an example here, Judah relating to Jews are going to reject in the end days righteous Tamars. And we see that already, okay? Now, she covered her face. It says this detail is mentioned twice, which prompts the Midrash to conclude she kept her face covered when she was in her father-in-law's house. She was so virtuous that she could not have had any suspicion about her. Rashi adds, because she lived virtuously in the house of her father-in-law, I have decided that she will give birth to kings, and I've decided that the royal lineage in Israel should come through the tribe of Judah. So it's interesting that God ordained both with Ruth and with Tamar that, she would be the righteous one. So she goes on and she is going to give birth. What's interesting is there's an insight here that, let me just read this this last paragraph. Maybe this will be our last paragraph. She gives birth, of course, to Perez and to Zerah, who, of course, Perez becomes the line of Messiah and so forth. But let me just read this last thing, because what we see here, the Satan was trying to stop Tamar. Okay. And boy, don't we see the Satan tried desperately to stop what's going on with Lapid, right? We've seen that through the years, and it's going to be, he's going to try some of it is just petulant and childish. Some of it is, more strategic, but it shouldn't come to us as a surprise. Okay. Quite frankly, if the Satan isn't fighting against you, if he's just letting you kind of do your own thing, that's because you're doing not your own thing, but his own thing. If he's not fighting against you, it's because he's got you right where he wants you. Okay. So just always remember that. You say, well, why are people, I see people online and they say bad things about Lapid Judaism. Well, why do you think, son? Why do you think? You're like, is Rabbi really a nutcase? Did I look like a nutcase? I mean, you have to say, why does this kind of stuff happen? I don't know. Why do people hate Jewish people in general? So anyway, listen to this, what it says. It says, if the Torah makes a special point of telling us that Tamar sent back his pledges only at the last moment, as she was taken out to be executed, then there was good reason for it, notes Rabbi Eliezer. She had mislaid the pledges and could not find them. Okay. So this is talking about, why did she wait at the last minute? She's being taken out to be executed. Why did she wait to the last minute to say, wait, here, because they were lost. Okay. It says here, she couldn't find them. This was the work of the Satan, who did his utmost to impede the entry of the Messianic dynasty into the world. For in it, he foresaw his most dangerous enemy, which is the Messiah, of course. Tamar implored divine mercy with all her soul, and just as she was being led out to the stake to be burned, she found the objects as if by a miracle. Thus, historical destinies sometimes hang by a thread, and their happy outcome is dependent upon a miracle. Rabbi Eliezer continues, it is to this slight incident, in reality of very great consciousness, that King David refers to in his hymn to God in Psalms 56:1, to the victor, the angel Gabriel, who conquered Satan and made the pledges reappear, regarding the mute dove, Tamar, who kept silent rather than humiliate Judah, removed those pledges that had been hidden on the part of David, her descendant, who pays homage to the victor Miktam, derived from Mirtam, the king patient and loyal with all. This is from Sota 10b. It's trying to say here that Tamar had planned all along to prove her innocence with these pledges that Judah had given her. But the Satan had hidden them from her. She couldn't find them until God did a miracle, and then she was released. So many patterns, so many insights. We're just out of time, but we are never out of content. Thank you so much for being a part of this program. Please be sure and like this video and share it with all of your friends. Subscribe to our channel if you've not yet done so. I did forget to mention in the beginning of this video about our fundraiser to raise money at the building fund to purchase our new digital sign. Please contribute. If everybody will contribute, then HaShem will bless it. So if you have not yet contributed, please make plans to do just that. Whatever you can give, $20, $50, $30, $200, $1,000, whatever you can give, please do so. No matter how big or how small, HaShem will anoint it and cause it to be fruitful. Please have a great day. Be blessed. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, just be highly blessed and highly favored.